that, as you said in the very quite early in your lecture, that the soul returns to God. Now, from the conventional point of view, the sort of fall, sort of estrangement from God, and then return of the soul to God, that characterizes the Western Judeo-Christian tradition, whereas it's very hard to find in Hinduism anything like this. Can you say something more about what exactly it was about?
Yeah,
the concept of fall.
Yes, it is a fall of consciousness. And this is also indicated in Bhagavad Gita in many places where Krishna speaks about how the mind, which simply means ultimately the consciousness of the soul, and consciousness is the energy of the soul, like light is the energy of a light bulb. So how consciousness and the soul become enemies. In other words, the consciousness draws the soul deeper and deeper into illusion. And how this comes about is, well, we have to think about the immaturity of certain souls. That the soul is always, as Krishna says, Mama Aivamsa Jivaloke Jivabhukta Sanatana. The soul is always my own spiritual energy, part of God's own nature. The soul is as spiritual as God is, but the soul is very tiny, and God is all-powerful, all-knowing. The soul is not all-powerful, not all-knowing. Like a spark, the Vedic literature gives the example of spark unto fire, same quality but different quantity. So Krishna says the soul is always part of my spiritual nature. The soul never becomes itself matter, but the consciousness of the soul can be drawn to matter. And this is due to immaturity of the soul's devotion to God. And an example can be given of a baby, a small child, in a mother's arms. In India, they have flat roofs generally on the house, so a mother can take the baby up on the top of the roof so at night, so the baby can see the starry sky. And the little child, seeing the full moon, may want to hold the moon in the hand. And the child reaches out but can't grasp the moon. And the child begins to cry, and no matter what the mother does, the child can't be pacified. So the intelligent mother may take a round hand mirror and put it in the child's little fingers and position the mirror in such a way that the reflection of the moon is seen in the palm of the child's hand. The child becomes happy. I'm holding the moon in my hand. Now the child is not holding the moon, but in that way the child becomes happy. And later on, the child may be brought to the understanding by the mother that you really didn't have the moon in your hand. But I did that just to make it peaceful. So there are some souls who, when seeing the wonderful manifestation of God's energy, they themselves would like to be controllers. They themselves would like to be God. And so that is why there is this material world. Here in the material world, the conception ruling over the minds of the living beings is that I'm number one. I'm supreme. This is my world. Everything is centered on me. I'm the center of everything. So again, this is Maya. This is illusion, but it is also God indulging our strong desire to be an illusion for a later date when we can be brought out of that illusion. So all the while, my point is, all the while, the child is safely in the mother's arms. The child is never away from the mother, but the child's mind or consciousness is an illusion. And so this is our understanding, that all the while we are still the spiritual parts and parcels of God, but due to our desire to realize ourselves as separate rulers from God, therefore we've come into this illusion of a world, of an existence in which we can think of ourselves to be the center of everything. We can think that this whole drama going on earth is ultimately here for us, you know? It's ultimately like People say like this, my world, my life.
So I would like to make a rather critical question now that I know that it sounds to me, and when I see that word Prakriti and then Jivas, that your basic philosophy has something very similar as Samkhya in Indian tradition, where material world, and not only material world, but also our psychological cognitive processes are part of that realm from which we should be liberated by the right method, which is some way related to knowing. It's epistemological in some sense. You are processing and chanting the name of Krishna, and then you will get free. But it's very dualistic, I mean, the conception of the reality. And in some sense, the counterpart in the Western tradition is Gnosticism, because in Gnosticism, man is considered to be a spiritual being which is very much tied by this material world. Okay, and I understand this, and if I'm correct or if I'm wrong in my interpretation, please let me know. But then my critical question is here. On the other hand, my overall picture of Hinduism is such that Hinduism has very much, Hinduism in general puts very much value to the material world. I mean, if you see, for example, how prasad is given to deities in many temples and so on. And so there's a kind of aspect of incarnation in Hinduism, that God can be encountered through material realm. And there is something which is related, very similar to Christianity, as I understand Christianity. I mean, that in Christian churches you can have Eucharist in Catholic Mass or Lutheran Mass, and then God is encountered you through this bread and wine. But I mean, in Christian movement, you also have this side of things. You have material things which you are offering to Krishna. So how you say, how can you explain this? You have both parts of Hindu tradition.
That's an interesting question. So you mentioned Samkhya philosophy. The word Samkhya in Sanskrit means literally to count. So it is a system of philosophical analysis of we might say the ingredients of the world. But there are two traditions of Samkhya. One is Nirishwara, atheistic, and the other is theistic. And we follow the theistic tradition, which is taught in the Bhagavata Purana, in the 3rd canto. So these categories are there, Prakriti, etc., the gunas, the 3 gunas. But you see, these are understood to be the energies of God. God is defined in the Vedas as Shaktiman, the master of all energy, and this world is an aspect of his Shakti, of his power. So the only problem is that we view this world as not God's power. We try to view it as our own power and manipulate it. And then that's the origin of this Maya. And then this energy acts upon us in an illusory way, a deluding way. So the healthy outlook is to see Prakriti. Prakriti simply means nature. So nature as God's nature. We speak of persons as having a nature. We say someone's nature is jolly, or someone's nature is very serious. So this is also God's nature. And so by the practice of Bhakti, we come to see that, and we relate with God through his nature, through his energy. But this is, like you said, we have to see the connection by this liturgical process, you might say. We have to learn to see the connection between these energies that we're confronted with here and the master of these energies behind. So the world itself, the energies of the world itself, actually, ultimately, our view of God, Krishna, is that everything he does is lila. Lila in Sanskrit means a play, a divine play. So everything that we're seeing here is a kind of a play of his own transcendental energies. They're playing as if they're material. And that's because we want them to be material as long as we're egoistic. because matter is something we can manipulate. We can get our hands on and try to control. And so God's spiritual energies act as if they were material, and that is deluding us. And the whole purpose of this delusion is frankly to cause us some suffering, so that we become doubtful in our plans to control and enjoy the world. We become thoughtful, and we wonder about a deeper purpose than in life than just this. And then we can in this way come to the path of God consciousness, devotion to God. And then in this way achieve a healthy relationship with these same energies.
So material realm is not evil as such.
No. It's man. This is in the Gita, there's a term dvandva moha. It means the illusion of duality. And this is a creation of our own minds that we impose on the world.
You mentioned some Bhakti, sort of regulations. Can you tell us something more about regulations?
Yes.
What would be the sort of principles by which one should live in order to approach God? And related to this, what's the understanding of the caste system?
Caste system.
Indian society, each person should behave according to one's own birth.
That's an interesting question. So let me distinguish first between Vaidhi Bhakti and the caste system. Because Vaidhi Bhakti is, this is a spiritual method, so to speak. And because it is spiritual, it is a means by which we become fixed in our relationship with the Lord. Therefore, it is open to all. There's no question of caste. Anyone who can follow the Vaidhi is eligible to do it. The full measure of Vaidhi is rather strict. So you see there are different gradations, but the full measure, like we who are full-time members of the Hare Krishna movement, and then we don't eat meat, fish, or eggs. We don't engage in sexuality out of marriage and procreation. We don't take any kind of intoxication, not even coffee, tea, cigarettes. Nor do we gamble or waste our time in frivolous activities. So this is the full, this is under full vows. One who's seeking to achieve Krishna consciousness in this life. But one can take Vaidhi according to one's capacity. It's not all or nothing. There are gradations. So we do recommend people who just want to take the first step. We recommend certain things, to adopt the diet that we have. That's very important. And then also in the Vaidhis, what I just described, these are four sort of negative regulations, and they're the positive things of chanting Hare Krishna and doing different forms of devotion, hearing the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. So it's a complement of two, you can say, negative and positive aspects of discipline. But this is open to all. Now the caste system, first of all, I have to even distinguish between what the caste system you see in India and Varna Ashram Dharma. The caste system in India is properly called Jati Vyavastha. Jati means birth. So it is a social system based on birth, not necessarily upon qualities. A Brahmin, for example, in India is, in general Hindu society, a Brahmin is someone who was born in a Brahmin family. And he may not have the karma in his life of a Brahmin. He may not be a temple priest. He may not be a teacher of Vedic wisdom. He may not be a performer of sacrifices. He may be a clerk in a government office. but he has a name, Bhattacharya or something, and people, oh, you're a Brahmin. You see, now this doesn't hold any water for us at all. We learned from our guru that this is not, you can't call this Varna Ashram Dharma, which is the system of social gradation taught in Gita and the traditional Vedic texts. So Varna Ashram, of course, the Varnas, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, Ashram, Brahmachari, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, Sannyas. These are different orders of occupation and orders of life, like student, family life, retired life, renounced life. So Varna Ashram Dharma is, in Gita, according to guna and karma, that means the quality of one's work. So this may not be the most widespread understanding, but it is definitely there, not only among the Vaishnavas, because it's there in the Vedas. In the Upanishads, there's the famous story of Javala Satyakam, who was a young man who wanted to know the Brahman, the Absolute. And so he went to a great sage, Gautama, and he asked Gautama, can I be your disciple? And Gautama, he said, I only accept Brahmins as my disciple. So who is your father? Was your father a Brahmin? And this Satyakam young man said, I don't know who my father is. The reason was because his mother was, she was a courtesan. She was like a prostitute. She had relations with many men, and so he wasn't sure which man was his father. So that's already indicative of a very low birth. So anyway, Gautama said, all right, go back and ask your mother who your father is, and then we'll consider. So he went back and he asked his mother. He said, I don't know who your father is. I don't know which one. That's your father. So then he went back and he told Gautama, I asked my mother and she doesn't know who my father is. And then Gautama said, all right, you're a Brahmin, you become my disciple. And the reason he said you're a Brahmin is because he told the truth. So this is from the Upanishads. The Upanishads are the orthodox, Vedic scriptures. So that tradition is there, and we rest our understanding of Varnashram on that, and also on Bhagavad Gita. That's according to what you do, not where, in what family you were born. So the caste system as it stands in India, being a system of birth, it doesn't rate with us at all. we have nothing really to do with that. If we did, then I wouldn't be sitting here because I'm born outside of India.
How do the Indians react? Because,
well, I'll tell you the truth. I was in Maharashtra, as I said, last winter, and I went to one of the big Orthodox. Orthodox in Hinduism means smartas. There's a class of Brahmins called smartas, which means they follow the smriti, the rules and regulations given as certain shastras or scriptures called smriti. And they're always very concerned about caste, gotra. Gotra means your family. So I went to one of the real, traditional Orthodox. It's a temple to Lakshmi, a goddess of fortune. And this is a very old temple, and I was interested to visit this temple because Chaitanya visited this temple on his tour of India, so I wanted to go there. And so I was introduced to these Brahmins who do the worship of this deity. They're not Vaishnavas. They're of this Smarta order. That means ultimately they're connected with Shankaracharya's philosophy. And they're caste Brahmins by every sense of the word. But they brought me right into the sanctum sanctorum, right in the presence of the deity, the form of Lakshmi herself. And I was given a conch shell with water, and I could bathe the deity. This only, the really select few Brahmins can do, and they just brought me right in to do it. And it was a funny thing. They have a ritual before you approach the deity, where you're introduced to the deity, and one of the things that you're supposed to tell the deity is your gotra, is your family. So the assistant Brahmin, he was asking me these questions, and he came to gotra, and then the head Brahmin said, he kind of pushed him, never mind that. He just so although they follow this system themselves, they do recognize that As I've seen on the internet in some Hindu forum of Hindus, I happened to stumble on a discussion about the Hare Krishna movement done by some Indians, and there was one was saying, yes, I was in America and I visited a temple there and it was very nice. What do you think of it? Someone asked him. He said, I think this is a very, very pure form of Hinduism. So they recognize that what we're doing is very pure Hinduism. So therefore they respect us. These caste distinctions don't matter anymore.
I would like to ask, how do you interpret the word Hindu? Are you saying that you are Hindu, or do you think it's some general term of...
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, we learned from our founder, Srila Prabhupada, my guru, that the word Hindu it's a kind of catch-all term. It's not in the Vedas. It's not a Sanskrit word, actually. It is a corruption of the name of a river, the Sindh River in present-day Pakistan, which the Sanskrit name is Sindhu. And when the Persians, the Mughals, they started this dynasty which ruled northern India from Delhi. So when they first started to come into India about 1000 AD, in their language they pronounce S as H sound. So they called that river Hindu instead of Sindhu. And the land beyond Hindustan and the people, the Hindus. And so this is how this word has come into use. And the Indians themselves accept it, but it really doesn't have any basis in the Vedic scriptures. And so we don't, in that sense, we don't really consider ourselves Hindus. We consider ourselves Vaishnavas. Of course, those who themselves are attached to this word, thinking of themselves as Hindus, then they will like to say, you are very good Hindus. And so we won't start an argument with them about we understand what they mean. But among ourselves, we don't use the word Hindu. I always say, the word is so vague, and it's the name of a river. So it's like, in the West, you have this, what is sometimes called the Semitic monotheistic tradition, which would include Judaism, Christianity, and Islam also. And in all three religions, there's the River Jordan is a sacred river. So if you imagine a person from India, if you introduce yourself and he asks you, what is your religion? You say, I follow Jesus Christ. Oh, you're a Jordanist. What would we think about that? So that's how we view this word Hindu. It's the name of a river.
But it's interesting. We will discuss later in our lecture series about Hindutva movement, and I suppose that you have probably quite critical view of that political fundamentalism now in India. But they are, as you know, they are putting emphasis on the idea Hindu is one for whom India, the country, the land, or maybe we should say the subcontinent, is Pitarhu and yes,
where they were born. Yeah.
Yes, and also holy. What do you think about that kind of?
Not much. This is nationalism in the disguise of religion, and that's. Obviously every religion has that problem, and there is some section which is kind of juggling nationalism, attachment to some piece of land as being all in all. And juggling that with some religious teaching, mixing it up and trying to inflame people in the name of religion, but actually it's not really religion. It's political. So my spiritual master, he always told us, he said, stay away from politics. He always said that.
Yes, how important is India for you as a sacred place? Is there a difference if you devote yourself here for Krishna, or is it some kind of goal to go to India?
Yeah, we do go to India on pilgrimage, and there are many places there, particularly Vrindavan and Mayapur, which have special significance as being places where this mood of devotion, this bhakti that I'm talking about, is nourished just by being there. And that's something we experience. That's not to say that it's not nourished elsewhere, but especially there because of the presence of places where Krishna himself or Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself appeared. And so there's such a strong association with these places and the Lord himself. So we go there to benefit from that. But you know, for example, here in Helsinki we have a Hare Krishna temple, and we consider that a Tirtha, holy place too. So, it's also a place where you can nourish your bhakti. Right here, you don't have to go, necessarily have to go to the
Okay, I think we have reached the end, and we may thank Suhotra Swami for a very enlightening